Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, welcome everybody. Good to see you, and lovely to sit with you again on this beautiful fall evening. So, why don't we go ahead and get comfortable for our sit? If you'd like to, again, you can sit up. If you're somebody who wants to lay down, please feel free to do so. Just have a pillow under your knee so that your lower back drops, and then you'll be more comfortable for the sit. So go ahead and just let yourself get comfortable, and you can close your eyes or look at the floor about just a few feet in front of you with a soft gaze. And this is just so that you're not visually stimulated. Okay. And so let's just begin by just taking a moment to notice where you're at today, in this moment. Oftentimes, we have a lot going on in our day, and we find ourselves holding it in our body. So we may have some stress or tension in our body, or some stressful thoughts racing through. And we begin with just allowing that. No need to fight it. Conditions are such today. This is how it's gone. We don't need to hold on to this. And so I invite you to just allow whatever's here to bubble on or pass through. Just let it rise off your body. Or you could gently breathe it out with your out breath. Just letting it go. And with each out breath, you're just emptying out your day. No need to hold on to it. And as you empty out, just allowing your body to soften, let go. Letting your mind relax. Letting go of the stories today. And letting your heart soften and open. Letting go of any pain or difficulty you carried today. And as you empty out your day, letting go of all the stories, the tension, just noticing what's left over. You may notice it's a little more spacious or quiet inside. There may be a softening or some warmth. Or maybe a feeling of peace. Whatever you notice in this emptiness, this emptying, let yourself begin to just breathe with it, breathe into it. So if it's spacious, you're just breathing into the spaciousness, allowing it to be as spacious as it wants. Or if you notice some peace, just breathing into that peace and letting it grow as big as it wants. Again, no need to grow it, but just allowing it to be here. And let yourself become it. You can just let go of me for a moment and all my stories. Let go of time. Just now, just here. And just let go of your body and let this quiet peace or this spaciousness be your body for a moment. So it's as if this peacefulness is breathing. And so you're just allowing this peace to just be here, letting go of everything else. Allowing yourself to almost just float in this peacefulness. Taking refuge in this peacefulness. And what's beautiful is that this peace is always available to us. This quiet is within. So it's not dependent on the world or conditions. Simply just on our emptying and our attention. The world can do whatever it wants, and we can always find this within. So just take a moment to get settled. So this week I was reflecting on a lot of people talking about their struggle with what I would call wise speech. And so as the news was playing out and people were saying, you know, I consider myself a nice person, but oh goodness, I had things come out of my mouth this week, or I had thoughts that I did not feel proud of or feel good about, you know. And what I wanted to point out is that wise speech is so important because our speech always reveals our thoughts. So speech is so important because it actually reveals the mind that we have. And so a lot of people found themselves being surprised at finding out what their mind was capable of over this last week in terms of things like when President Trump got sick, or the White House having a lot of coronavirus cases come up. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how we work with our mind when we're kind of surprised by these kinds of difficulties. So, you know, how do we work with this? I mean, in the bigger picture, the bigger picture is that to remember to have compassion for ourselves, right? It doesn't help to go into judgment and harshness on yourself. It's just, oh, conditions are such. What's being revealed are these formations and these parts of my mind that are just unresolved at the moment. So they're being popped up. A second thing to consider is that everything is temporary. You know, what is one story that's so powerful right now and I feel so strong about it, a week from now, it's gone. And it's over and it's old news and it's not that big of a deal as it was a week ago. And so to have that perspective in the middle of heat, like, oh, in a week from now, I probably won't feel so strongly about this. That can actually help cool it right there, if that makes sense. Yeah. And you know, the other thing that we get caught up in when we get caught in unwise speech or our mind is on fire is that we often get caught up in the idea of, we don't actually put words to it, but what is so hot for us often is that we consider that our values are different from theirs. Your values are different than mine. That we just can't agree. We have different values. And there's the huge split in our communities. And what I want to point out is that actually our values are often not that different. And it's actually a way for us to come back home. That, in fact, if you ask most people what their values are, most people will report the same kinds of values. So most people would say, well, I want safety and I want us to all be safe. And I want happiness, and I want my family and my loved ones to have happiness. And I want prosperity, that everybody has enoughness and does okay. You know, you'll hear those kinds of things. And as I often say, you know, as long as we stay down at this level, everybody's in agreement, right? It's when we come up to, well, how are we going to do that, that we actually start arguing with people. And so really what we're seeing in those moments is we agree on the values. We all want safety, happiness, these kinds of things. What we're seeing is the difference in our conditioning. We've all been conditioned, how are we going to get these things? And there's where our mind splits with other people, right? So our conditioning can be, for instance, religious. It can come from our religious beliefs. You know, we're seeing a lot of that right now in the news with Supreme Court justice nominees and things like that. It can be, you know, whether we were raised racist or not. It can be whether we are raised in a city or rurally, and also things like Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. You know, so people have ideas like, well, the way we're all going to get there is everybody has to work hard. And other people have ideas like, well, no, the way we're going to get there is we have to carry each other and help each other, and we all have to get there together. And so it's this breakdown in conditioning that actually gets us in trouble. And so I wanted to talk about how to work skillfully with that. I have a colleague of mine who actually is a peace mediator and works internationally. And one of the things that she told me that she does that really helps her, because I mean, she works with dictators, she works with people all over the world. And she said, when I walk in the room, one of the things that I'll hold on to is I separate the person from their politics and their conditioning. That there's a human being who's been conditioned this way. And she said, and when I do that, I can have complete care and well-being and wishes of well-being for the human being. And I also can still have really strong boundaries about what I consider harmful conditioning and what this person's doing. And so I just want to bring that up, that this idea that we can separate out a human being from their conditioning and their impact or their politics. And if we do that, then it makes sense that, you know, during a tumultuous week like we just saw in terms of the weekend, that we could have wishes of well-being for somebody who is a difficult person. It's quite possible to have wishes of well-being because at this level we're all humans. We're all humans, and we want everybody to come along. We want everybody to come along. So, you know, one of the things that I see sometimes is people argue about, and this again is a reflection of mind, is what would be considered right view? Who's right? Right? Who's right in this? And we can argue about it. You know, in our value, not our values, but in our conditioning, we can argue about what is right view. And I love this teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh, who was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King. Pretty special human being when Martin Luther King nominates you for the Nobel Peace Prize, right? And one of the things he said was that in his understanding of it, wrong view was anything that led to ongoing suffering, particularly any kind of suffering behavior that led to ongoing suffering. And so that's a really important distinction, suffering that leads to more suffering. So if we think about it, if you think about something like surgery, for instance, there's pain and suffering in having surgery, but that's a suffering that leads to the end of suffering, right? But if you deny someone, let's say, education, that's a suffering that leads to more suffering. And so for me, I find this very clearing in terms of when I'm in confusion. It's like, okay, I can unbraid that I care about a human, but I can be really clear that if what you're doing leads to ongoing suffering, then I don't think I want to get on board with that. So does this make sense? Like this can be a line for us, right? I'm not participating in ongoing suffering. And it's really clear and clean to people that say, well, my way is the right way. You can simply ask, does your way lead to more suffering? If your way does not lead to suffering, then hey, I'm with you. But if your way is going to lead to suffering, I don't know that I want to be on board with that. So it's just a nice clarity, and it helps the mind calm down, because a lot of times when we're revved up, it's because we can't find our footing. And the more we can't find our footing, the more we get into chaos. And then the more chaos we have, the more reactive we become. So I love these little simplifications that kind of give mind a place to land, right? And it's also helpful when you have to go through suffering that's going to actually lead to the end of suffering. So for instance, if you're trying to stop an addiction, or you have to do a surgery or a treatment or something like that. So given this, what I want to ask you is to just take a moment and just maybe close your eyes for just a moment and reflect on some of your responses, whether they be in speech and you said them to someone or you just had a thought. Some of your responses that you had over the last week around, I'll just bring up two issues. We could use President Trump getting ill. We could use the White House having coronavirus. And whatever your responses were, again, compassion, we don't have to judge ourselves. But just to ask yourself, did my response move towards the end of suffering, or did it feed suffering? And just to notice that for yourself. So if you had supportive thoughts, that's one way. If you had hateful thoughts, that's another. But just noticing, oh, in myself over the last week, were these responses going towards the end of suffering? Did they actually create the end of suffering? Or did they facilitate more suffering or feed suffering? Eckhart Tolle would say, did we feed the pain body? And so, just thinking on that for a moment. If you found that you were feeding the pain body, then I hope your very first thing that you come to is compassion for yourself. Because if so, you were suffering. You were suffering. And so when we're suffering, we want to bring in self-compassion, loving kindness. We want to release the stress out of our body as bubbles or heat, or breathing out the tension. And to be gentle with ourselves, because right there, we were in some kind of fear, contraction, some kind of pain. And see if there is any tension or difficulty, then just notice what it's like if you allow it to bubble off. You don't have to hold on to who you were in that moment. And notice what it's like if you just allow it to arise and pass. No need to grab and judge and beat yourself up. And to notice that this was suffering. If my mind is harsh or my speech is harsh, I am suffering. So given this, how might we work with it in a way that can acknowledge that suffering is present, for ourselves, for the person who's being difficult in that moment, right? I have another colleague. I'm very blessed to have some really brilliant colleagues that do some beautiful work in the world. I have another colleague who does a lot of systemic work, and she points to this exercise that she loves to do when she feels the need to comment on Facebook or Twitter or any of those kinds of social media platforms. And she said that she borrows this teaching from Elizabeth Gilbert. Elizabeth Gilbert is the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, that book and movie that many of you have probably seen. And I thought it was a beautiful practice. So she said what she does is she starts with the reaction. So when she sees something that somebody's done and that thought comes up like, right there she takes a pause. So just take a pause, and you can let the energy bubble off. You can breathe it out for a second, just something to take a breath, just to stop the whole reaction train. And then right there, name. Really important to do this, to name what is it that's bugging you? What is the pain that's bugging you right now? Oh, I think this person is selfish. I think this person is clueless. I think this person doesn't care about people. You know, whatever it might be. They're trying to cause harm. And so you name what is the irritant. And then once you have a sense of what that irritant is, this is a great question. Ask yourself, when have I done this? When have I been selfish or self-serving or clueless or not listening to the other side? It's a beautiful question, because right there we bring it right back down to this level of humanity where all of us are hanging out. And once you have a sense of how you're doing it, what she said then is, go ahead and write a response, but write it to the both of you. And write what you wish somebody had told you when you were in that moment. It's a beautiful offering, a beautiful healing. And so it brings us down into safety, happiness, well-being, prosperity. It helps us remember that this is community. We all are lost in how to get there. Nobody has the answer of how to get there. But what if we brought compassion to this moment and a sense of understanding and holding and loving, and brought us back down from the separation into the community again? I think it's a beautiful practice. So tonight, if you're so inclined, there's a great opportunity to practice. There's a vice presidential debate, like in 45 minutes, right? And if you want to practice, you could watch. And then as soon as you see your mind go, "Ugh, ugh, how could they? How could she? How could he?" Right? As soon as you see that, it's like, oh, pause, right? Oh, suffering. This is suffering over here. Oh, what do I think they're saying? Why am I so worked up? Oh, this reminds me of my older brother. Whatever it might be, right? And then, when have I done that? Right? Letting it bubble off. Saying some loving kindness for yourself. Saying loving kindness for both of you in that moment, whoever that is who's got you going. Could be the moderator for all you know, right? Could get mad at the moderator. So it's a wonderful way to practice. But if we do this, if we remember that we have these similar values, and where we're getting all twisted up is in our conditioning. And I mean, did you get to choose your conditioning? No. We didn't get to choose our conditioning, right? People are raised where they're raised in the community they're raised in. May we all get clarity so that we can hear each other and come up with the best solution. But we can love the people in the world and know that they want what we want. They just may not be going about it in a way that we think is the most helpful. So how do we be part of that solution? And my sense is the best way is to start with, if you're reacting, you're suffering. So staying with that, tending to your own suffering first, is the way we clear our mind, which is how we'll clear our speech. Right? And setting intention to practice in a way that we want to see what's true and real about everyone. We don't want to get hung up on their conditioning, on their fears, on their trauma. So, and you can even have that as a phrase. when you see someone who's really not, maybe their suffering is adding to more suffering, to just sit back and say, wow, I'm really seeing their suffering, their conditioning right now. I'm seeing that this comes out of their trauma, their pain. And just notice what happens to your mind and heart when you remind yourself what it is you're actually seeing, to separate the person from their conditioning. I truly believe that deep down, at our most essential nature, all of us are inherently good. We're all inherently good. We're very confused lots of times, fearful. I mean, think about how hard it is for you to put down your parents' conditioning, particularly the stuff that you don't want, the stuff that's not helpful to you. Not that easy. And it's not that easy for them either. So just this idea of healing and coming back to community and coming back to see that we all want the same thing. How can we get better at this so that we actually get there together? Yeah. So, and we have a couple of minutes. Any questions or comments? You can unmute yourself.
Beautiful topic, Maureen, and so appropriate, so timely, so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I really appreciate what you're saying, and it has makes so much sense to me. And what do you do with people who are just continuing to harm and suffer, make other
Mm-hmm.
people suffer by their actions, by their words?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's your breath, and I get it all, but it's very, very difficult to just observe continual pain being distributed to many other people,
Mm-hmm.
intentionally and possibly unintentionally.
Great. Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So, for me, right, it always comes down to the idea of action, right? So, in the example I gave you with Elizabeth Gilbert's work, she actually writes to people. She writes in the comments, she writes to people, but she spins to the healing of it, right? And you might do that with a cousin on Facebook or something like that. If it's these bigger things, like let's say these bigger political issues, again, I come back to, this idea of, are we staying in a certain privileged comfort zone, or are we actually part of the solution? What I'm saying is you can separate the person. You can see that that's their conditioning, and you can ask yourself, what is it I feel drawn to do to stop that harm that is bringing more harm? And that's going to lead to actual action, which then is going to open a whole can of worms, right? Because at that moment, well, I'm scared. I'm scared to make phone calls for my political party. I'm afraid to, whatever I'm being asked of. And that's going to make us have to do deeper work. We get to then go in and look at our fear and say, okay, suffering right here, afraid to, answer the phone call, answer the call that I'm being called to. But we may be actually being called to much bigger, deeper work in our life that we're meant to be at, right? So I always come back to this piece of action, that if you're complaining to people and you're still agitated, right? And you've already complained to all your friends, chances are there's something more you need to do. And so listening to your own heart about what is it that you're called to do. For some people that's run for Congress. For some people it's become politically active. For another person it's I'm going to donate a significant amount of my money to whatever, climate change, those kinds of things. So that's where I come into is what are we doing? Because I think one of the problems we get into is, where are the leaders? Where are they? Where are the grown-ups? And it's like, it's right here. It's right here. And a lot of us don't want that. We want there to be a great grown-up and a great leader. But, I'm reminded of the Dalai Lama, who said, I don't think that there will be one person who is the next Dalai Lama. I think it will be a community. So this idea that actually it may be a time for some change. So a lot of people don't like to hear that part about the action, It's like, oh, darn it. I just wanted to comment on Facebook. But that's where it lies, I think, with all of us, right? We have to become, well, as you hear the phrase, right? Become the change you want to see, right? Another way I like to say it is, what if our purpose in life is to work to create the world we would like to live in? A world of safety and those kinds of things. One of the things I use in my own personal work is I have a phrase, dignity, respect, and nourishment for all. And so it's one of my markers. So when I look at my own mind, if I have a harsh judgment or something going on, I often will ask, am I having respect, nourishment, and dignity for that person? Because in my world, the world I want to live in, I want everyone to have that. Does that make sense? Yeah, thanks. Maybe someone else, if there's any other questions or comments.
Just so helpful. Thank you, Maury.
Yeah, so if any of you go to watch the debate, watch, right? It's like, oh, activation, activation, activation. It's like, oh, suffering, right there, suffering. See if you can do these practices. I'm reminded of one more Thich Nhat Hanh story, just so beautiful. His birthday is October 11th. So if any of you are Thich Nhat Hanh fans, he's going to be 94, I think, 93, 94. Sending him some loving kindness would be great. But he tells a very profound story of being a witness in hearing all the stories of rape to boat people off the coast of Vietnam and off the coast of Thailand. And pirates were just taking over these boats, and he was devastated by it. And he stopped himself because he had anger, rage come up. He was just like, oh, like these people are wrong, that kind of idea. And what came to him was the thought, if I can't work with this, then there's no hope of me ever becoming enlightened. And he wanted to become enlightened. And so he realized that everything had to be worked with. And so he stopped and did his own internal process. The gift of that process is the poem Call Me By My True Names that many of you may know or have heard of. It's a powerful, powerful poem. But it was written out of his own transformational work, dealing with his own pain about his people being taken over and really brutalized by these pirates, these sea pirates. So yeah, we're all called to this work, but we're called to action. My bias is, let's calm our mind first. Let's remember these are our brothers and sisters. I love this idea of calling people home, not calling them out. Or another phrase is calling them in, not calling them out. Let's help call everyone home. And I don't know what your piece of that is, but I imagine if you do it, it will make your heart sing, whatever it is. Not that you won't have to grow a lot and do some hard work, but ultimately it'll make your heart sing. So let's just sit for a moment, just take a mindful moment and just share our intentions here. So you can close your eyes. May we take these teachings and deeply ingrain them to remember that when wise speech or wise thought is present, so is suffering, our own and others. And may we practice deeply to release our own suffering so that we can call the world in, call the world home, and do our work to be a part of that. And may this deep work benefit all beings. May it ripple out from our own life to those we know, those we don't, across the world, so that all beings may come to know peace and happiness, safety, well-being, enoughness, joy. We have a chance to wake up on our planet. May it be so. May it be so. So thank you for your attention. I had some people ask me about talks. I record most of them and put them up on my website. I also put them up on truesuccessforall.com, and that has actually access to all the past recordings if you're interested in doing that as well. And someone asked me about just supporting this work, and always grateful for that support. If you go to maureenfallon-cyr.com, at the end there's a little PayPal button, and you can always do what makes your heart sing. So anyway, love sitting with everyone. Hope you all are well in this coming week, and keep working with that suffering so you can keep your mind clear. So wonderful to sit with all of you guys. Great to see you all.
Thank you, Maureen.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Thank
Good
you,
to see
Maureen.
everyone.
Yep. Bye.
Kathleen. Sandy.